how to build an ACH batch. At this point, we are under the Cash Manager tab and then the Current Batches sub-tab of ACH. So this is the screen that we are looking at here, Current Batches. At first glance of the screen, you'll notice that there are kind of two areas, scheduled batches and unscheduled batches. The unique thing about this is unscheduled batches is more of a template setup. So in the instance that we go in, we create a scheduled batch, and we want to be able to use that same template that we've created. Maybe it is our payroll file, and that is a file that we will use once a week, every week. Maybe it's a file that we'll use once every 2 weeks, depending on our payroll period. But there's an option there so that we can retain a copy of that batch once the file is processed. When that happens, when that file is processed, then a copy of that batch is retained and it is listed in the unscheduled batches area so that the next payroll period that comes along, the user can come to this screen. We can click on the batch name to open that batch, edit the batch, schedule it out so that we can manage what we've already gotten set up and maybe just manipulate the dollar amounts that we're paying our individuals based on the new pay period. So what we'll do is go ahead and take a look at adding a new batch. The screens look pretty well the same with the exception of the scheduling area. So I'll go ahead and start off with adding an unscheduled batch so that you can see what that looks like. And then we'll look at scheduling that batch and going ahead and putting a date on it so that it would process. Upon opening the unscheduled batch screen, we do have a batch name that we could go ahead and insert here. We do have an offsetting account to choose from. The offsetting account drop-down list would be populated based on the access privileges that the bank has granted access to be able to generate an ACH from. We do have an entry description. I'm just going to use payroll as an example. The company name. This company name listing is populated from the companies that we have built out under Cash Manager Company Setup, which would have been covered in the Company Setup recording. You'll notice that once we do select our company, the company display name and the company identification number or tax ID number is pre-filled for us, so we do not have to manually enter that. You could potentially enter discretionary data if you so desire. Entry class, this drop down, you'll see there are multiple entry class codes, but the SEC codes in this area are populated based on the bank settings. So I would anticipate that you probably are not going to see all of these. These are all of the codes that are out there, but they're probably going to work with a PPD or CCD for the most part. There are some other fields here, batch last edited by, batch status, and then date, batch last edited. These fields would populate in the event that this is a batch that we are utilizing multiple times or saving a copy of this batch to come back and reuse that every time it processes. So these fields would be populated if this were a payroll batch that had already processed, and we're just coming in to manipulate the batch and maybe update the dollar amount records for our participants or payees to pay them the correct payroll amount for that time period. The schedule type, you'll notice that it is marked as unscheduled. We will leave this as unscheduled for now and then circle back to that once we finish the batch and save it off. So we'll circle back, and that comes into play whenever we are looking at how to take an existing template and schedule that out so that we can reuse that template for another payroll going forward. So at this point, we would go ahead and click the Save button to retain the changes that we've made at the top half of the screen, and you'll notice that some of this information is already populated, batch last edited by, batch last edit date, batch status. That does already go ahead and populate for us at that point. So we have the essential batch information built out, but we're ready to go ahead and start adding our participants or our payees that we want to add to this file. So we'll kind of skip to the bottom half of the screen. You'll notice that there are a couple of different options here. There is add new details, and then a drop down, and then we have add participants. So add new details allows us to add a new line so that we can have a manual entry for a brand new participant that has not ever been in the system before. If we wanted to add participants from our participant listing that is found under Cash Manager and then the participants that would have been covered in a previous recording, we can actually click the add participants. We should have a drop down that populates for us. And then at this point, we could go ahead and check mark all of the participants from our list that we want to add to this batch to be able to pay. So I'll select a few and just click off of that. Once you have those check marks, you'll need to click off to the side to collapse that menu back. And we'll go ahead and click select participants. And you'll notice that it comes back and the screen pre-fills and populates for all of my participants. You'll notice that when it does add my participants, though, the name, the account number, the routing number, the account type, all of these fields are grayed out. If there were any edits that needed to be made to these fields for these participants, it would have to happen under that participants sub-tab. Because those would be changes that would have to happen kind of at the master participant level where that's stored within the system so it can be used for any batch at any point if you wanted to. If for some reason we were ready to go ahead and move forward, we could go ahead and just plug in some dollar amounts to pay our individuals. If it is an individual that they are new with our company and we wanted to send a pre-note for them, we could accomplish that from this screen. This is the pre-note authorization option. You would just check mark that pre-note, and instead of leaving the field blank like this, in order for the pre-note to be included in the file, you do have to type a dollar amount in there, so you would need to type 0.00 to signify that that is a pre-note so that it is included in the file. If the 0.00 is not typed, that record will not be included in the ACH file that is sent out, and that pre-note will not be sent out the door. Another note to add to this screen is the DR. This would be the debit side. So if you are a company that has the ability to create ACH credits and ACH debits, this is how you would alter that so that you could make this transaction a debit. Maybe we needed to debit this individual $2, but we wanted the rest of this to be credit. You could do that this way by check marking the debit column. By default, if you do have credit permissions and debit permissions to generate either one of those, by default it's always going to be a credit unless you check mark this box to make it a debit, and you would be able to alter that at that point. If you only have debits, then it would automatically default to debits for you at that point. So at this point, I'm actually going to go ahead and just click Save All. And we're ready to actually go ahead and move forward. But kind of before doing that, I did just want to point out maybe if we had an option to, we've hired someone to come in and do some, off the clock work for us, something that they're not a regular employee. We don't want to add them to our regular participant listing. We just want to include them in this single batch and only pay them from this batch. We could go ahead and just click Add New Details. The drop down here, this is going to signify how many blank lines you're adding at a time or how many blank participants you're adding at a time. I'm just going to leave this at 1. We'll go ahead and click Add New Details. and you'll notice that it brings up the option for me to set up a participant. Again, going this route to add a participant to a batch is specific to this batch. So if this batch were to process and we did not retain a copy of the template, we would lose this altogether. So if it is a participant that you are wanting to keep in the system and pay regularly, regardless of if it's a recurring batch or a one-time batch, you would need to build them out under that participant tab that is a separate area. Okay. At this point, we have everything filled in. It is a checking account. We'll just leave that there. Payment-related information, if we have specific memo or addenda information that we wanted to send with this specific transaction, we could key that there. We'll go ahead and click Save. You can see that the new participant has been added, example participant there. And if we wanted to, we could go ahead and choose here at the top if we wanted to edit all. This is actually going to open up every field within our participant listing that we could edit. So for our participant that we keyed in on this screen and just set up as an add details participant, we can actually go through and edit all of their information here. On the other users that we added just from the participant record, all that we would be able to edit for them would be the pre-authorization, pre-note field, the debit field, identification, and then the dollar amount. Those would be really the only fields that you'd be able to edit at that point. So I'll just cancel out of that. The other option that you'll see there is going to be edit detail amount. This is actually going to open the screen so that you can edit the amount, the pre-note or pre-authorization, and then it would retain the debit or credit side of things. It's not going to allow you to change that on the screen. Only just pre-note and amount is what you can edit here. Go ahead and cancel that. So at this point, we've actually built out our batch, we've added our participants, and we're ready to move forward. So we'll go ahead and save this. Save the batch again. And at this point, if I were to go up to my Cash Manager tab and just click on, say, Current Batches, this is going to loop me back to the Batches screen where I can see what is out there as scheduled and what is out there as unscheduled. In the unscheduled section, you'll notice that we do have that batch that I just built for us as an example to kind of walk through. If for some reason we wanted to get rid of that, and this is true for the scheduled batches area as well as unscheduled, we could check mark that and then just click delete selected batches. In the instance that maybe we've already keyed this batch and payroll has already happened, everything has been processed, and the system has just saved a copy for us as a template. If that's what we're looking at is a template, and maybe it's payroll time this time around, we're ready to open this batch back up and then schedule it out for our upcoming pay period. All that we would have to do at this point is just click the batch name. This is going to open it back up in that batch screen for us. And at this point, we'll go ahead and choose the drop down for schedule type, and we can make this one time or reoccurring, depending on your payroll periods. If when you utilize reoccurring, I always tell customers that the best time to utilize reoccurring is if you are working with individuals that receive the same amount of payroll every pay period, and there's absolutely no variation in there. Because it does retain all of this information. It generates the same file on a regular basis. So reoccurring would be more along the lines of maybe a payment that you're making, something that you're sending out that the dollar amount is constant and it doesn't change very often. Go ahead and select a one time, and we're ready to just kind of move through the prompt and getting this set up. The holiday, we would have to choose whether we want to pay before or after the holiday if for some reason our effective date that we're trying to select does fall on a holiday. The system is actually built out so that it would detect the next possible effective date. So it's not going to allow us to choose an effective date that is impossible for the bank to meet when the file is generated and sent out the door. So it looks like our earliest available effective date would be maybe the 22nd, but we could go ahead and move through and schedule this on out if we needed to. The next option is save and unscheduled batches after last scheduled transfer. What this is doing is retaining that copy of this batch as a template and storing that in the unscheduled area once this batch processes. So if our effective date is the 23rd, this batch goes all the way through the processing piece in the scheduled area on the previous screen, and then once processing finalizes on this batch, a copy of this batch would be saved, and it would be listed out there in the unscheduled batches area so that we could click on the batch name, open the same screen that we're on, and work through making our adjustments or changes to the batch for whatever reason. Moving a little further down the screen, there is an option here for approve on save. If you have the ability to approve your own batch, you would have the ability to approve on save, and what that means is if I click save batch here, it's going to automatically approve it at the same time without having an additional step in there of saving the batch and then having to go in and approve it. This only comes into play if the individual, as a user, if you have the ability to approve your own batch that is being set up. If you're in a dual control situation where you can only create a batch and someone else has to approve the batch, you would not have this option. If I wanted to move down the screen, I could go ahead and edit my participants. You'll notice kind of the example participant that I added as an add new details record in the previous recording for adding participants. That participant is still listed there, so if that were a one-time participant that should have only been paid one time, I would need to go ahead and delete that participant out of the record there, just to keep everything clean. And at this point, we could go ahead and choose to edit all or edit amounts and edit our information that we're wanting to change. If maybe this time we need to generate credits to everyone, maybe everything needs to be a debit. If we're not wanting to send any pre-notes this time, change our dollar amounts, we could accomplish that just by editing all or editing detail amounts only. That would allow you to update those records. Again, if you have added a new participant out there and this is the first pay period, you could go into the Add Participants listing and go ahead and add them to the existing list if you wanted to. Uncheck Approve on Save, and at this point we'll go ahead and click Save Batch. If I wanted to go ahead and request approval, I could request approval, and that would notify the other staff members in a dual control situation. That would notify them that there's a batch out there that they need to go in and look at and approve if they have that access. But we'll go ahead and kind of move back to the current batches screen so you can see what it looks like. And you can see at this point my new batch is listed. It is listed in the scheduled batches area, so it moved from unscheduled to scheduled. We can see our effective date, our debits, and our credits. We can potentially print this information from the screen if we wanted to. Another piece that I'll point out is the expansion arrow on the far left. We can expand from the screen and we can see what participants are included in this batch. This would also be true in the unscheduled batches area. I failed to point that out sooner, but the expansion arrow does exist in both areas where you'd be able to expand to see the participants directly from the screen if you wanted to. Any edits or changes that would need to be made, you would need to click on the batch name to open up that edit batch screen that we were just looking at. In the instance that approve on save, if that were set, if we did have approve on save set, and we save batch here, we could go back to our current batches screen, and we would see that status as approved.